as you may know, the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security is a relatively new conservative think tank. Some of us came over from the Begin Sadat Center at Bar Ilan University. Others have joined us since we established the Institute. More recently, we've been joined by the outgoing Deputy Chief of Staff of the IDF, General Yair Golan. We already have among our ranks the former National Security Advisor, General Yaakov Amidor, and several others. And we felt obliged to put together for the what we all assumed or hoped would be a newly elected government, an outline of key issues, key policy recommendations in the field of national security, foreign policy, grand strategy. As you may all know, the Prime Minister has failed to put together a working coalition, despite what was clearly an election victory on the 9th of April. And as of yesterday, we are once again going to an election for the next Knesset, because this one has dispersed itself after this failure. And we are scheduled to have a new election on September 17, and hopefully by then there will be a new government. But the challenges do not stay put. The challenges require a response anyway, and so we've listed them and put our recommendations in the public domain. At the core of our concerns, where we felt obliged to take a very clear position, is the sense that the regional situation remains unstable. Iran's plans and designs and the possibility of a major confrontation, a major conflict, still looms very large, particularly on our northern frontier, where the Iranians have full control of Lebanon and share control of Syria with the Russians. And they also have proxies within the Gaza Strip and, of course, elsewhere in the region, with the Houthi uprising in Yemen, elements of the Iraqi militias, and so on. So the possibility of conflict requires, we believe, a very robust effort by the government of Israel, and in the future, the next government. First of all, to sustain national cohesion, to limit and control the harm done by a very abrasive election campaign, and heal some of the wounds and keep the people united around the purpose of confronting and prospering against very determined enemies. We also suggest, and here is, I believe that's the imprint of some of our former senior soldiers, we also suggest that the old spirit of the IDF, taking the conflict to enemy territory, once again asserting the importance of maneuver in the battlefield, is also part of what we would recommend to the incoming government, or to the present government as it considers and reconsiders its options. We put a very strong emphasis on Jerusalem. We are a Jerusalem Institute. We believe that Israel's duty is to keep Jerusalem united, functional, and govern fairly and firmly in united Jerusalem, not only because of its historic and religious and moral value for the Jewish people and for Israel as a state, but also because of its absolute strategic centrality in the balance of strategic factors for the future of Israeli security, which also calls for a sophisticated policy towards the 1/3, more or less, of the population in Greater Jerusalem, who are Palestinian Arabs. We also, and I know this is a delicate proposition, we also believe that Israel, for the time being, given the very limited prospects of a breakthrough in the peace process, if that's even the proper word, we need to focus on effective conflict management with the Palestinians on one hand, and we need to extend a welcome to President Trump's initiative and to his efforts to change the dynamics, to break the logjam, to walk away from what I call the EKP. It's almost as bad as the AKP. The EKP is the initial for everybody knows paradigm. The assumption that everybody knows what a Palestinian-Israeli permanent status agreement would and should look like. There's one problem with this EKP, with this very common wisdom around the world, which is that Israeli politics and Israeli people do not accept some of its basic premises. For example, the interpretation that Resolution 242 requires a withdrawal to more or less the 67 lines. That's not our position. It's never been our position. This has not been the position of most American administrations over the years. And if the present administration would move the goalposts, would change the dynamics, it would actually make a future agreement, a future solution more likely. Right now, we've had a very long logjam, a very long failure to move forward, precisely because of unrealistic expectations. So we need to manage the conflict while extending a welcome to Trump's initiative. We also need to be very careful in managing our relations with elements, foreign elements, who are now trying to penetrate Jerusalem, and not only Jerusalem, with a special emphasis on what the regime or government of Erdogan in Turkey is trying to do, to incite, organize, push for destabilization of the situation in Jerusalem, elsewhere, and that requires close attention and countermeasures. And this also extends more broadly to stand together with others in the Eastern Mediterranean in building up a capacity to contain and to limit the impact of Erdogan's ambitions. Here we point to the emergence of the secretariats, the tripartite secretariats, the Israeli Greek Cypriot, the Egyptian Greek Cypriot. Add to this the creation of the EMGF, the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, in January this year. I think these are all very important developments, and they are closely related to this question, to this challenge posed by the present trajectory of Turkish policy, of AKP policies. Beyond that, we look at the broader agenda of Israeli foreign policy, trying to build new patterns of cooperation with more and more elements in Europe who find it useful and beneficial to work with Israel. Step carefully in Asia so as not to find ourselves on, so to speak, on the elephant path between the People's Republic of China and our friends, our close and dear friends in the Indian government. And more generally, and of course, to sustain our relationship with the United States and do whatever we can do under increasingly polarized political conditions in America to sustain the bipartisan base of support for the Israeli-American special relationship. and ultimately to build, and I would say to rebuild, because a lot of damage was done to the professional capacities of the Israeli Foreign Ministry in recent years for various reasons that are beyond the point here. But we need a robust capacity not only to make remarkable breakthroughs in bilateral and multilateral relations, and I think the Prime Minister deserves credit for what happened in this respect over the last few years, but also to follow up with a wide variety of policies and operational relations with more and more countries in the world which find Israel an important and useful partner. This is in a nutshell what we are recommending to the government, and of course we drill down to details on this whole range of issues. For me, as you may know, the Eastern Mediterranean is one of the highest priorities, and I find the developments of the last 7-8 months since the Egyptian-Greek Cypriot tripartite in Elunda to be of extremely positive and promising nature. Insofar as we now have the beginning of institutionalization with the secretariats, with the EMGF, joint military exercises, and more just recently, under very sad circumstances, major fires in Israel. Luckily, no loss of life, unlike previous occasions, but still quite a lot of damage done. And it was very gratifying to see essentially the entire what I call the 3+4, that's to say Italy, Greece, Cyprus, Egypt, Jordan, the Palestinians. I think the Jordanians didn't manage to send any help, but everyone else came and participated. So did the Croatians, because there is a quadripartite emergency response arrangement or agreement between Israel, Greece, Cyprus, and Croatia, countries of the Eastern Mediterranean, which know what forest fires are like, unfortunately. And so this is another opportunity for Israelis to be reminded of the benefit of Eastern Mediterranean integration.